Hello, everyone. I'm David Kopf, the executive editor of Occupational Health and Safety magazine. Welcome to today's executive Q&A webinar, Transforming Forklift Safety Through AI-Powered Collision Avoidance. Today's webinar is brought to us by Matrix Design Group. Many thanks to them for making today's presentation possible. I encourage you all to go pay back their support by checking them out online. I'm eager to dive into today's webinar as forklift and powered industrial truck incidents continue to be a persistent and major safety challenge. And AI-powered collision avoidance and analytics technologies are really starting to help predict and prevent these incidents. It's a fascinating topic. And fortunately, we have a really good speaker for today's session. I'm talking about none other than Jackson Phillips. He's an account manager with Matrix Design Group, and he works out of the Indianapolis, Indiana office with a focus on safety innovation in the industrial sector. Jackson specializes in the Omnipro visual artificial intelligence systems, which is a cutting-edge pedestrian detection solution designed to help reduce incidents and improve overall facility awareness. Over the past 2 years, Jackson has worked closely with both end users and equipment dealers to help facilitate the integration of Omnipro into daily operations. With a driven foundation in customer education and technology adoption, Jackson brings practical insight into how AI-driven safety systems, can create real, measurable improvements on the job. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Jackson, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks for having me today.
It's great to have you here. Before we get started, I want to give everybody out in the audience a few housekeeping items. As you probably saw when you registered, this is part of our executive Q&A series. In this type of webinar, a large portion of the program is going to be dedicated to answering your questions about forklift safety and AI collision avoidance and analytics, and to get some direct expert insights from Jackson, who's really kind of at the center of all this, and kind of tap into his expertise. So I always say it, but consider this webinar a little bit like open office hours with the professor, where you can submit questions and then we'll post them to Jackson and Jackson will answer them. If you'd like to submit a question, all you have to do is use the Ask a Question console on your screen. And you can do that at any point while Jackson is talking or I'm talking. All you have to do, again, is just use that Ask a Question console. To give us a little structure, I actually have some interview questions about this system and about AI collision avoidance. So I'll be asking Jackson some questions as well, but we really intend for the majority of the session to be dedicated to answering your questions. So hopefully you guys will join in with us. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, click on the Help button, which is located below the slide window, and you'll receive some technical assistance. And lastly, after this virtual event today, you'll receive an email containing a link to an archive of today's presentation. So you can go back and review it, or maybe share it with a coworker who might have missed it. Oh, and if I'm not mistaken, we also have some resources from Matrix in the resources section, which is, it looks like a blue paper clip, a tab with a blue paper clip on there. So go check that out. Okay, with all that said, I think we're ready to kind of kick things off. You ready to go, Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, let's dive in and kind of talk about, why forklift safety needs a new approach. Obviously, they are essential. Forklifts and powered industrial trucks are essential and commonplace across, all sorts of manufacturing, logistics centers, all sorts of things. But, take one look at OSHA Top 10, as well as just, BLS data and everything else, and incidents remain stubbornly high. What's changed in today's industrial environment that makes collision avoidance such an urgent priority?
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure that this is something that most listeners on the call are going to be able to relate to, right?
Mm.
Especially with the world of material handling constantly evolving, and now we're seeing it evolve a lot quicker than it did in the past. There's a rapid increase in facility automation, which in many cases is going to lead to tighter facility traffic areas. And because so much additional infrastructure is needed and facility sizes aren't changing, what you run into is efficiency is on the rise, but space to operate seems to decrease. And then so you kind of take that variable and you combine it with the constantly present trends that have always been around, like labor shortages, inexperienced operators that are being paid on performance, and then, the ineffective nature of some traditional safety measures like signage, mirrors, and where we've seen training in the past. It's kind of just obvious that the trends between PIV to or PIT to pedestrian interactions aren't going to decrease on their own.
Okay, so if they're not going to decrease on their own and people really need to start addressing this, how are companies starting to rethink, forklift safety, and not just in terms of compliance, but as sort of a part of the entire organizational's operational performance?
Well, with that, first and foremost, in a lot of situations, we're seeing companies being forced to adapt to the change and the evolving technologies across all areas of their business to begin with. Part of that is automation and that infrastructure that's coming into play to begin with. So when the workforce is already accustomed to that technology adaptation, you're going to find an openness to newer safety practices. Secondly, it's become apparent to a lot of companies that productivity and safety can stabilize and enhance each other. And whenever a workforce is going to feel supported by the technology around them, there's going to be an increase in confidence and consistency. That's going to allow more autonomy inside of your workforce, more confident decision making. And what that's helped do is make safety a more measurable performance driver rather than some simple compliance metric.
That makes sense. So when you look at recent industry data, and I'm sure you guys are looking at data all the time when it comes to forklift safety and PIT safety, are there some patterns or some blind spots that you see emerge when it comes to either near miss or struck bys?
Yeah, and at a high level, outside of just focusing on those main pain points, the biggest blind spot from the 30,000-foot view is going to be underreporting. As a blind spot or weakness when it comes to pedestrian interactions with forklifts, many safety practices that are considered or traditional, they highlight those recurring risk areas, busy intersections, and then blind corners. But what they fail to do is to help mitigate the potential risk in areas thought to be low priority or across the facility as a whole. So what we're able to do with technology through AI is we get to retain those actionable insights for that entire facility. In the past, in order to kind of gauge where you stand on a facility as a whole, you need that benchmark. And that's kind of what we help capture throughout the facility as a whole. And whenever we are able to provide that benchmark, we get to put managers in a situation where they feel like their safety goals are more attainable. And as everybody knows, more attainable goals is going to lead to better training, which allows managers to be proactive rather than waiting for an incident and then having to react on the back end.
Okay, all right. Having that information leads to proaction, which is always a great thing. We've got some audience questions. I'll remind everybody, if you want to submit a question for Jackson to ask about this, all you got to do is use the Ask a Question console. This first one, you mentioned benchmarks. This is a good one. How do we assess whether our forklift safety programs are keeping pace with risks or not?
Yeah, there's collaboration that has to happen between ourselves and the customer when it comes to that. First and foremost, you've got to be able to grasp that benchmark. Without a technology like ours, it's hard to place a measurement or get any kind of ROI on the back end because you're going from no technology to technology. And there's a huge portion of that that relies heavily on the trial aspect of a technology like ours, and measuring out what those sets of criteria look like for you guys to be able to consider yourselves successful or make sure that the implementation is successful. Um, Being able to measure whether your benchmark is effective really just at the end of the day requires collaboration between ourselves and the customer. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, that right, because no two companies are different, right?
Right.
So another question: are there leading indicators that we should monitor to predict uh, forklift incidents before they happen?
Leading indicators. Yeah, you're going to be able to see whenever you look at reporting and filtering of what we're able to accomplish. We like to say that our filtering capabilities are stackable. So from outside of just a true risk reduction and basically minimizing those near miss incidents, you're going to be able to get a lot more granular with it from a reporting capability standpoint. So what you're going to have the opportunity to do is basically you can filter down by time. So you're not just going to gauge your facility as a whole. What you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to gauge, maybe you're running into a lot of incidents when people are leaving for lunch, or maybe whenever there's shift changes. And you're going to be able to take reporting date and time stamped, and you're going to be able to look at your facility and how you're operating morning, afternoon, and evening, and you can gauge those against each other and day to day.
Okay, we've got some more questions rolling in. If you'd like to submit a question, all you have to do is use the Ask a Question console. Before I dive into some more audience questions, I want to cut in line here and ask a little bit about AI-powered collision avoidance because we've kind of set the stage with statistics, but I'd really love to get into talking about the system here. So what was the genesis of AI-driven collision detection, and how does it work in a forklift environment? I think we've seen this in cars to a degree, right? Like maybe with Teslas and those sorts of things. But obviously, this is a totally different environment. So what was the genesis here, and how does AI collision avoidance work, in environments where you have forklifts and powered industrial trucks?
Right. Yeah. And so, the answer to this question, there's a little bit of story time dialogue that goes along with this one. This kind of gets into the history of who Matrix is. Matrix has been operating in the underground coal mining world for upwards of 20 years now. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Alliance Resource Partners, and we have a product called IntelliZone that is actually mandated in underground coal mines that we've got 95% market share of that market inside the US. And so what IntelliZone is, it's a magnetic-based application. So we're working to solve the exact same problem, but in underground coal mines. And so since it's magnetic-based, that it does require RFID tags. That's a great technology or solution for underground applications because in a lot of situations, mines, they have one or two ways in, one or two ways out. So you can truly monitor who's going in and out of that facility on a hourly basis, and you can make sure that people are abiding by that RFID tag requirement. Whenever you look at whether or not that's applicable in the above ground world, though, it's a lot harder to monitor who's inside your facility in the industrial spaces constantly, no matter what safety parameters you're laying out. So then you fast forward a little bit after that release of IntelliZone and us kind of riding out on that success. And we kind of saw, there's the exact same need above ground in the industrial space. But what criteria did we need to look at in order to solve that issue? And the criteria that we kind of laid out for ourselves were, one, we needed to be able to be price competitive. Coal mines and putting a system on a continuous miner you've got a lot more play with the price point with coal miners than you do being attractive to the normal industrial market. Number two, we needed to be able to get rid of that RFID tag. In any kind of safety solution or equation above ground, you want to minimize that human variable in the equation as much as possible without completely getting rid of the operator's ability to make choices or autonomy. And then three, we needed to be able to alert on people and other objects of priority in all different types of environments with a high level of confidence. And so what we did was we looked at radar, we looked at LiDAR, and we looked at ultra wideband, and then we looked at AI. And AI was what was going to check all of the boxes for those criteria. We were going to be able to minimize that human variable, get rid of that RFID tag, and then we were going to be able to differentiate between different objects of priority, meaning radar and LiDAR do not discriminate. Radar and LiDAR alert on everything that a vehicle is going to come in contact with, just like a backup camera in your car. AI, though, we're going to be able to differentiate. We're not going to be constantly filling your facility up with noise. We are only going to alert your operators on objects that you guys want us to be alerting on, essentially.
That is fascinating because right there, right, that's the difference maker, is that it's not keying off of just everything. There's some sort of layer of decision making happening. So let's talk about the operator experience. How does all this appear to the operator? Like, is there a screen, or what's the operator experience here?
Yeah, and first and foremost on that, operators are the biggest key variable when it comes to successful implementation with a product like this, right? If your operators hate it, or if we're driving them nuts, you're going to have a hard time being successful on a full scale rollout inside your facility. So what we have allowed ourselves to do is, from a priority basis, we are only alerting that operator whenever it is a dire situation and we need to be alerting him. And what that operator is going to get is, we like to say, we're touching three of the operator's senses: see, hear, and feel. And without getting too deep into the layout of what our system is, we are zone configurable. As a standard, we're operating as if there's a yellow zone on the outermost perimeter of that vehicle's direction of travel, and then there's a red zone closer to that vehicle. And we look at that as the same way as like a stoplight. Yellow is cautionary, proceed with caution. We're just making you aware, hey, your time's running out. Somebody might be getting a little close to your vehicle. That red zone, we call that our alert zone. That is top one priority. Operator needs to be aware. At that point, we're integrated into the machine. And so what this looks like is, if a person or an object of interest breaches that yellow zone, we're going to give that operator a very subtle indication that that's taken place. And that's just going to come in the form of a yellow light inside of the cab. Cautionary, we don't want to be driving the operator nuts. We don't want to be filling the facility up with noise. Let's take that for example, though, and let's move that object closer to that vehicle inside of that red zone. What's going to happen is that light inside of the cab is going to turn red. At that point, too, there's a 95 decibel audible built into that indicator light that is going to start going off. And then we have the capability to integrate into the machine's throttle as well. So that operator is going to feel that accelerator go limp. And the best way to explain how that throttle integration piece works, we're not applying any brakes, or we're not looking at ourselves as any kind of kill switch wired into the can of the vehicle. Reason for that is we don't want to void any warranties or leases that you might have with your dealer. So at a very high level, what that throttle module is capable of in case of a red zone breach, for ease of math in a perfect world, let's say that you've got a machine governed at 10 miles an hour. Customer can come to me and say, well, Jackson, whenever there's a red zone breach, I want 90% of that throttle power taken away. What's going to end up happening is, of that 10 miles an hour, we're going to disrupt 90% of that signal, meaning the operator is only going to have access to 10% of that throttle power, or 1 mile per hour. And he's going to be able to feel that accelerator go limp inside of that vehicle. So that's the see, hear, and feel. But what we're truly going to show the operator as well is we have the ability to have an in-cab display. There's no functionality to it as far as system configuration goes. Your operators aren't going to be in a situation where they can go in and modify the system's capability. The display is exactly as it reads and sounds. We're only going to show the operator what those cameras are seeing, and whether that is forward-facing, rear-facing, split screen, or maybe we leave it blank until there is a true detection made. You have all of those different capabilities, and you don't have to have a monitor in the cab. But that's what the operator experience is going to be like at a high level.
Fascinating stuff. We've got some good questions in the queue. I'm going to ask one more question of my own, and that is, how does this adapt to really busy environments where you might have mixed traffic, like a busy warehouse or a loading zone or something like that? How does this work in those sorts of situations?
Yeah, and that's one of the golden questions that's always asked up front. And that was kind of one of the differentiators on the back end that helped us choose AI rather than radar or LiDAR or technology like that, because AI is capable of filtering out those objects that are not of priority to us, essentially. So what's going to end up happening is in those high traffic areas, we are only going to be alerting on people and those other classes that a customer chooses, whether that's restrictive signage, or maybe you want to be alerting on other pieces of material handling equipment as well. If those are present in the zones, we're going to alert on them. But if you're in a tight area where maybe your zone is breached by an object like a trash can or a bollard or a rack or wall, we're not going to be alerting on that. We're going to filter that out, and we're only going to send alerts to the operator in case of a zone breach on a class or object that we consider a priority. As a caveat to that, though, if you're on this call and you're familiar with technology like this, or maybe you've looked into it in the past, you've probably heard of the phrase false positive, right? And what a false positive is, maybe there's a human-like figure, or maybe we're just in an environment with low lighting, and we're picking up a specific object over and over again that maybe we're recognizing as a person, but is actually not a person. What we have the ability to do, since we own the AI model, is a custom model application. I haven't seen this happen very often. I did it a few times when I first started with the company as an intern. But all we have to do is customer gives us access to those images we're capturing of those false positive events. We can go into our model and we can train those out, and we'll remove those. So that way we're filtering out as many false positives as possible. And we're only giving your operator alerts on things that definitely are humans.
Okay. All right. Well, and it's interesting here because that's a question we have from the audience, or related, and that is the AI intended to identify people only, or does it also work around other AGVs as well?
So it's kind of a multifaceted, there's different ways to answer that question, right? Okay. What our system is capable of is, what I like to tell people is, we can train the system to alert on whatever objects that you guys want us to. But that's going to come at a what kind of cost case scenario. If we start having our system alert on racks, bollards, walls, and poles inside your facility, it's just going to go off all the time. It's going to drive your operators crazy, and we're going to slow down production at the end of the day. So we like to hold that to just people, maybe just other pieces of material handling equipment, and then restrictive signage as well. Those are really the big three that you can have your pick and choose of, but we wouldn't want to deviate away from that. If you want to be alerting on AGVs, we can do that. We don't have to, though. But if you're not alerting on other pieces of material handling equipment and AGVs, we're going to ignore them, and you're going to be able to operate around them, no problem.
Excuse me. Are the cameras on the forklifts or through on-site cameras?
So for a forklift application, in order to reduce pedestrian to PIV interaction, the cameras are going to go on the forklifts themselves. We're not going to mount them as standalone. I know that this webinar is more focused on the forklift aspect of things, but there are machine guarding applications and standalone features as far as intersections, drop-in gates, and stuff like that. But as far as it pertains to forklifts and pedestrian interaction, those cameras do get mounted on the forklifts themselves.
Okay. On the Matrix website, it lists the Omnipro vision as working on sit-down forklifts and reach trucks. Does this equipment work on, say, powered pallet trucks or order pickers or that sort of thing as well?
So you could put this system on any vehicle that you want to. I drive a 2018 Chevy Impala. If I wanted to put this on my Impala, I'd be able to do that.
Love it.
The biggest piece of that, though, is whenever you deviate from putting it on forklifts, you're going to lose that feel aspect of what the operator is getting. We're only going to be capable of see and hear. So it's just that audible and visual alerting capability. Whenever you start looking at other vehicles, we're not going to integrate into the throttle because those installations are just a lot more invasive. And the throttle is just a lot different from vehicle to vehicle. We wouldn't really be able to accomplish the end goal of slowing the machine down without applying any brakes. So throttle integration, that is exclusive to forklifts for the time being.
Okay, and just to remind everybody in the audience, if you have a question for Jackson about AI collision avoidance for forklifts, please use the Ask a Question console, and we'll keep our conversation going. I'm going to ask another audience question, and then I'll ask some questions. I thought this was a neat one. Do you build in modules into the AI so that it can learn more about the environment at an end user site?
Yeah, and so no, we don't. We're constantly training it on the back end in our environment. And kind of the best way to explain this is to look at the differences in artificial intelligence, right? I don't mean this in a facetious way. I mean it wholeheartedly. Everybody's an expert in artificial intelligence now, right? Because you use Siri, you use Alexa, you use Chat GPT. I know you do. Don't tell everybody that you don't. Everybody uses it at work. And those are a lot different than what we're doing, right? Those are free-flowing, generative aspects of AI that are constantly learning and being tailored by the environment around them. We hold ourselves at the core level of artificial intelligence, which is machine learning, meaning our system is not going to learn from the environment that we put it in. It's not going to be able to train itself. We train the system, and it's not going to be able to do anything that we haven't taught it or told it how to do with the customer permission. With that, though, we are constantly, just like Apple pushes out updates for the iPhone, we're pushing out updates on our own model as well. And those, when it comes to updating, that's not any kind of subscription-based application. We own the model. We own everything from the front end to the back end. So we're constantly developing what our system's capable of, but it's not going to do that on its own and in your own environment.
And how do the updates make it to the end user? Is it through is there a manual updating process, or how does that work?
So for the time being, right now, that's just going to come in the form of a simple file that we'll push to you via email from our customer success or field service team. In the future, though, very soon, our cloud reporting capability is going to be commercially available. And with customer permission, we'll be able to do over-the-air updates.
Okay, all right. And let's dive into some questions about that I have. And there's also, it's good because there's also some questions in our inbox coming in, but about the following. And that's, about the data that this system uses. And I guess what I mean by that is, is this able to collect data, and then are you guys, able to trend it so that, people can, it's not just about collision avoidance, but it's about understanding, what's happening on the floor where this forklift or this powered industrial truck might be used?
Right. Yeah. And you said it best. The first thing you have to do is understand what Omnipro does, right? And then so outside of that initial detection and alerting capability, you have your reporting on the back end. So one, we're detection and alerting, two, we're reporting. And the way that those are kind of captured is anytime there is an event or detection inside of a zone, what we're capable of is actually taking some images. So you're going to see some pre-event images. You're going to see event images. So the entire time that there is someone inside of those zones, and then you're going to get a couple of post-event images. And so not only will you have access to those images that are date and time stamped, but we're also building reports out of those on the back end. So you can filter by time and understand. You can filter by time, and then you can also filter by vehicle direction, whether you want to be looking at forward state of travel, reverse state of travel, or both. And whenever you kind of apply those different filters, what you're going to be able to do in the Omnipro dashboard is go in and see, okay, this is how many yellow zone warnings I had, which I'm not too worried about. That's just going to happen inside the facility. But what I'm going to be able to do is understand how many of those yellow zone warnings actually turned into red zone alerts. And then you can actually click into those live reports and understand what images comprise, or what those comprise of, image and sequence wise. And then from a sequence of images standpoint, we're not able to push you guys a true video just because Wi-Fi and cellular infrastructure a lot of times doesn't have the bandwidth to be able to support that. So we're capturing consecutive images to show you what took place to cause that event, what happened during, and then what did the operator and pedestrian do in order to kind of mitigate that situation. And then I know that this isn't really part of the reporting. What I do like to tell people, though, is whenever we tell people we're capturing images, some customers get a little turned away by that, especially if they're unionized. We want to be as friendly with our unions as possible. So we are capable of doing facial blurring inside of the images. So anytime those images are taken, we're going to blur the pedestrians' faces so there's no recognition on the back end.
And what are some of the things that organizations can do once they have this data? What are some ways that you feel you can use this data to turn this data rather into action?
So, outside of just your standard changing your training practices, right? It kind of comes down to just presentation. So we don't want to be alerting in a way to where it's only beneficial to one party of the organization, which in a lot of times technologies like this, once you get past the alerting aspect, the reporting is only beneficial to your executives or leadership teams. We don't want to be that way. So it kind of just comes down to what dashboards are you going to present and to which parties. So there's real-time alerts to operators specifically. Then you've got your aggregated trends for leadership, and both are going to help measure those outcomes, like those near miss reductions, and you can show those measurements to both parties in two different ways. Where you're going to find you're more capable of that, though, is going to be our cloud. In the cloud, you're going to be able to filter down your reporting so you can get filter by time. So you can see true trend data of when your facility might be the most unsafe. And then that's more for your executive leadership. But then you can do filter by vehicle. And this is kind of where you get a little more operator specific. A lot of times who operates those vehicles at what time. So that operator or the vehicle incident reporting is going to pertain more to your operators, whereas trend data is going to pertain more to your executive leadership. And all of that's going to be capable inside the cloud.
Got it. And so, and whether it's the reporting or whether it's deeper analytics, this can be used by, say, executive management to link safety to operational trends, I would imagine.
Yeah, of course. And you know, a lot of leaders, what they're doing is using these incidents to modify like your big three: your shift timing, your traffic flow, and then prioritize retraining in those high risk zones. And the end goal is always to move from reactive incident response to proactive risk reduction, right? And so, without naming them specifically, we've got two customers, one being in the pulp and paper world or consumer products, and then building products. The facilities that we go to are really comparable with those two customers. And what we see a lot is you have the majority of your workforce coming in and out of one area specifically of that facility. And then in that same area is the most high traffic from forklifts. And so whenever shift starts during lunchtime and shift end, you're going to get a lot of incidents take place because you're just having too much interaction. And so what we've seen is not only operators taking it under their own accord to kind of move to different traffic areas of that facility, but we've seen management kind of critique or change how traffic works in the facility as a whole.
Let's transition over to some audience questions, and I'll just remind everybody out in the audience, all you got to do is use the Ask a Question console, and I'll pose your questions to Jackson. Now, we've been talking about analytics, but I do like this. I do like this question. Just getting back to more about the description of the system. Is there an option for PPE detection?
There is not right now. I know that there are technologies that are capable of doing that right now. That's more of a behavioral detection inside of the facility. You know, that's something that we've been talking about recently and might be on a roadmap. That's one that I'd like to take offline if we can make that happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And everybody, Jackson will have your information if you've posed a question here, and so he'll have an opportunity to loop back with you. And then this is getting back to the data. This is a good one. Can we,
David, you're breaking up a bit there.
Information and integrate it into toolbox talks? And if so, how might you suggest that we do that?
Hey, David, I missed the majority of that question. You're cutting out.
Oh.
We're going to let David have a quick moment to reconnect, and then we will continue, everyone. We will jump back.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Hello. Yes, we can. Can you, Jackson?
I can.
Oh, great.
Okay, wonderful.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm sorry about that, guys. So at any rate, the question was about the data and the particularly the dashboards. Can we use that's in the dash?
Jackson, is it bad for you too?
Yeah, I can't hear what he's saying.
All right, everyone, give me one more moment and we'll have him reconnect. And if we can't, I am happy to take over. Just give me one moment.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to try just audio only. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay,
I'll let you know if it
let's
breaks
go
up
audio.
again.
Okay, I'm going to go audio only for the moment. And I'll try a third time on this question. Maybe this question is haunted. The question is, how would you suggest, or one, can we incorporate the dashboard information into toolbox talks? And if so, how would you suggest that we do that?
That is one, you're kind of getting into the sensor fusion capabilities. So bringing in other technologies as far as data that you already have, if I'm understanding that question correctly, like telematics, or maybe you've got radar or some kind of operational management tool. If we could take that one offline, that would be great, David.
Okay, not a problem. And then next question, how can safety teams use data to make the case for continued investment in tech?
Yeah, so this one ties back to like that ROI piece. So if I'm understanding correctly, we're kind of looking for, what is the proof of concept to be able to take back to executive leadership to make a case for continued expansion or full scale rollout, right? A lot of that is heavily dependent on what our trial or pilot findings look like. Without that benchmark to be able to measure against, what we're going to be able to do inadvertently is reduce your claims and inadvertently keep you away from any kind of, worst comes to worst, injury or fatality. I think in 2023, OSHA handed out almost $8 million in fines for unsafe forklift practices, and the average cost of a forklift related incident was $40,000. So if we can show that we are trending downward as far as near miss frequency goes, you can inadvertently or on the back end apply that to showing, hey, we are moving ourselves further and further away from putting ourselves in harm's way of having any of these workman's comp claims or anything like that be put against us.
Okay, another question. Can analytics help uncover hidden risks that we might not see?
Yes, and that kind of goes back to the very beginning when we were talking about, traditional safety measures. Really, they put a lot of pressure on your high risk areas that you guys can see firsthand, just because that's where a lot of people are interacting with vehicles, right? But with a system like ours that is always active whenever the vehicle is on, since we work off of switch power, we're going to uncover areas inside of that facility where interactions are taking place that you might not even be aware of.
Okay, and I'm going to toggle onto some questions that I wanted to ask specifically about measuring, safety success and communicating it. And I'm curious, Jackson, what metrics best capture the impact of AI-based collision avoidance? Beyond just incident reduction, are there any kind of key data points that can help communicate that?
Yeah, so you want to measure indicator of risk, behavioral change, and then proactive risk reduction. And so the way that we kind of characterize those metrics are your near miss frequency, being able to measure those going down as you implement this and kind of critique the system and make decisions based off of the findings. Operator compliance with those alerts. And so that's a little bit harder of a thing to gauge without looking at that image data. But whenever you get that image data, you're going to be able to see what decisions are my operators making whenever these events are happening to kind of mitigate the situation. And then your pedestrian exposure rates. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the near miss frequency. But if you're setting yourself up in a situation where you're not even getting those yellow zone warning alerts, maybe they aren't even, you're not in a position where yellows aren't turning into reds, but maybe you're not capturing as many events to begin with at all. So you're driving down that pedestrian exposure rate. And those are kind of the big three metrics that we use to help gauge trial success as well. And those would be the three that I would start with.
Okay, those make sense. So another question, how do these technologies contribute to broader goals, like say overall operational excellence, or maybe company sustainability, employee retention, those sorts of things?
Right. Yeah. And, you know, we want productivity and efficiency and safety to all support each other, right? So you don't have to just look at safety practices as driving down efficiency. We want to improve efficiency. So with that, creating a safer environment, we're going to reduce your downtime and costly incidents. And whenever your employees feel supported and valued by the technology that you're implementing, you're going to help aid your retention as well. And fewer accidents, inadvertently. What does that mean? It's going to mean reduced resource consumption for your repairs and claims. And that's all going to contribute to your sustainability goals.
Okay, let's do an audience question here. What is a reasonable time frame for seeing measurable improvements if we deploy this kind of technology?
We usually like to set our trials or pilots. You want to measure it in intervals of 30, 60, 90. So that first 30 days, that's getting your operator and everybody familiar with the technology. That next 30 days, that's where we truly dive into this is what we want to see out of the system. And then based on those findings in that second 30 days, that's where you choose to make your decisions on what you're going to change inside your facility. And so you push all of those together really within that 90-day time frame. That's where you really want to be able to take those metrics and measure, were we successful in that first 30 days of educating everybody of what was taking place? Did we have the right criteria or motive in place in that second 30 days? And then what did we do after that 60 days? In between 60 and 90 days were the decisions that we made effective.
And I'll just remind everybody, if you want to ask a question to Jackson, use the Ask a Question console. Another audience question, are insurers beginning to recognize or incentivize the adoption of AI-based safety tools?
Yeah, I'll answer that at a high level. That's one, we could hop on a call and talk about for an hour. Short answer, though, is some, not all. That's actually an avenue that we're kind of pushing right now. I'd love to hop on a call and have a deeper conversation about that, though. That requires us to kind of get interactive with whoever your insurance provider is, which we're more than willing to do. And you don't have to play the middleman in that. We just kind of need to be able to basically make your insurance aware of what we're trying to accomplish. In some cases, we've actually seen insurance companies provide grants to some customers in order to trial a system out. But that's a whole nother world as far as operation goes that I'd like to dive into offline.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, I'm going to toggle back to some of my questions, and that is, let's talk about the road ahead. Obviously, we're talking at least what seems to me the future of industrial safety. How do you see AI and machine learning and video analytics continuing to evolve in workplace safety over the next few years?
Yeah, so there's kind of two different aspects of that, right? So it's proactive, not reactive. And then you've got your data compilation piece with sensor fusion, and we'll touch on both a little bit. What we want to see in order to be proactive is more predictive capabilities out of AI. So rather than just detecting risk in real time, we want to be able to forecast where and when those incidents are likely to occur. And then whenever you look at the data compilation piece or sensor fusion, and what I mean by sensor fusion is tying multiple different components of technology together. So AI, radar, and telematics. So aside from being proactive, what we want to be able to do and what we will be able to do at a high level is, like I said at the beginning, radar does not discriminate, right? So I'm sure there's some people on this call that are not just worried about people, they're also worried about their pieces of machinery and their facility infrastructure as well. So what we want to see is, AI is going to capture a large field of view or point of view, and we're going to be able to alert on people a little further out, right? But we don't want to be alerting on walls, racks, and bollards in that same point of view that we are for people. So we're going to tie radar into that umbrella, and we're going to bring that scale down to maybe like a 3 to 10 feet range. And that's going to be tied into our alerting capabilities. So we're going to be able to mitigate that risk that you run of running into those walls, racks, and bollards without driving up your alerting too much. And then there's the telematics end on the backside. Down the road, what do you want to be able to see? Well, you would like to be able to tie our detections into the telematics system that you probably already have. So those impact detection capabilities, operator recognition, things of the like. But at a high level, we want to get to the point where we're capable of predicting where and when those incidents are going to occur rather than just being reactive and detecting the risk in real time.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Jackson, are there ethical or human factors or considerations that need to be a priority when it comes to these types of technologies, or maybe other AI-backed safety automations and augmentations and improvements?
Right. And this is probably answering this question is a good time for me to clarify a statement I made at the beginning. Whenever you look at implementing a technology like this, transparency and operator trust is very key. We're not going to be successful without educating or laying out the correct roadmap for the operators and people in the facility that this actually affects. Right. And I made the statement at the beginning, the first thing you need to be able to do whenever you're gauging what a safety system or what a safety standard kind of looks like is you want to drive down that human variable as much as possible. With that, though, we don't want to take away your operator's autonomy. And the best way to kind of present that to your operators is, look, this is an extra set of eyes for you. This is something that is only going to slow down your work when it needs to. So bringing your operators up to speed is, that's the human factor. As far as the ethical factor goes, I advise every company to be aware of what their data is being used for and where it's going. We have a lot of competitors. I'm not going to name drop anybody, but there's components inside of some technologies like ours that they're sending data straight to China or Japan, because that's where a lot of technology comes from. We're in the process right now of our ISO 27001 certification. So from a data retention and location standpoint, that's where we want to get clerical and make sure that we're as transparent with the customer on where that's being stored, how their IP is being used, and who has access to that.
Okay, all right. I have one more question, but we've got some good questions in the inbox, and I want to make sure that they get answered. Jackson, has Matrix developed a business case to be used to justify spending the money on this technology? In other words, how much money might a company save by implementing collision avoidance?
Yeah, and that kind of, there's a couple different levels to that. Depending on the industry that you're in, what's the frequency, or have you had any kind of fatalities or near misses or impacts that have kind of affected you guys in the past? And so those are all things that we would need to know in order to lay a business case out for you. But without getting fully integrated to what's happened historically for that customer, it's hard to truly paint a business case for them without any kind of trial program or proof of concept in that environment, right? But we do have a large umbrella of big customers that we've been working with for years now. And what I have done, and what a couple other people in my same role are able to do, is if you have questions surrounding that proof of concept or ROI, to be able to present to your leadership, just to be able to prove that this is worth it, we can set up calls without myself being involved with some of those customers to talk about their experience as well.
Okay. All right. And I like this question. Can this system be transferred when a forklift is replaced with a new unit?
Yeah. So as a standalone, there's the different reporting capabilities, right? See in here, from forklift to forklift, if you take our system off and put it on a new one, the see and hear aspect are going to be there. The only difference is that you might have to order a new throttle module depending on what the schematics of that new machine looks like. That would be the only hardware change that we would have to make.
Okay, and then last question for me, and then I think we'll sign off, is what should decision makers do now to prepare for this sorts of technology? How do they prepare in terms of their business, their workforce? And I realize it's a huge question, but I'm thinking more just kind of strategically. How do they set themselves up for success with something like AI collision avoidance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to make sure that you're successful, what we request of the majority of our customers is, engage your employees early on. Not only that, have your preliminary due diligence and what your roadmap looks like laid out. And we have a lot of resources that sometimes don't get exhausted the way that they should. We can get people to your site in order to do on-site demos, let systems run around on your vehicles for a set amount of time to be able to get some early proof of concept. Anybody on this call is more than welcome to join us at our Evansville, Indiana facility, get into our testing labs and interact and put our system through the ringer. And then on the back end of that, trial programs as well. Working with us collaboratively, letting us know what your facility looks like and what those concerns are, and letting us correspond together to be able to lay out criterias for success. You don't want to get into a technology like this and go full bore into a full scale rollout. Working in sales, would I love that if everybody just wanted to do full scale rollouts all the time? Yes, I would. But you're not going to get a lot of success out of that without making sure you've brought people up to speed, you've done your due diligence, you've got one or two systems on a 30, 60, 90-day trial period before a full-scale rollout. So really just making sure that everybody who is going to be affected by a system like this is incorporated into what we're trying to accomplish. That's step one.
Okay, well, that's a great place to start then. Jackson, I think we're going to have to end our interview and our Q&A with the audience here. Thanks very much. That was a fascinating conversation. I'm amazed at how fast this technology is evolving, and I really appreciate you answering all the questions.
All righty, thank you for having me, and I appreciate everybody hopping on the call today.
Absolutely. Everybody, remember, in the next day or two, we're going to be emailing you a link to an archived version of the webinar so that you can go back and review it or share it with a coworker. Also, we're going to let me give out 3 notes of thanks real quick before we sign off for real. First off, I want to thank our expert Jackson Phillips, account manager with the Matrix Design Group, That was a fascinating discussion again. And also, one last time, thanks to our sponsors, Matrix Design Group, for making this conversation possible. Again, encourage you to check them out online. They're at matrixteam.com. Again, matrixteam.com. And last but not least, I want to give a thank you to everybody out in the audience who listened in and participated with us and gave us such great questions there. You guys are the reason we do this, so thanks for the interest and involvement. Remember, I hope everyone has a great rest of the week, but for now, goodbye until the next Occupational Health and Safety webinar.
Thank you, David.